You've eaten chicken probably hundreds of times this year. Breasts, wings, thighs, nuggets. It's a staple on almost every dinner table in America. But here's a question that's going to bug you for the rest of this video. When's the last time you saw a male chicken on a label? Ever seen a pack that says rooster meat at the grocery store? No? Me neither. So where do they go? Do we really only eat female chickens? Are billions of male chicks just disappearing somewhere along the way? Stick around, because the answer involves a Cornish game hen with a surprisingly misleading name, a legal definition most people have never read, and a fate for baby male chicks that most people have no idea exists. Let's get into it. Let's start with the biggest myth that we only eat female chicken. That's false. Here's the setup. Nearly 9.5 billion chickens are raised for meat in the US every year. That's the broiler industry, the birds that end up as breasts, thighs, and wings. And based on how chickens naturally hatch, that starting population is close to an even split, roughly half male, half female. In the broiler system, males and females aren't normally separated, because both are raised for meat. They hatch together, they're fed together, and either way, both sexes are heading toward the same destination. So the question is, if close to half of them are male, why does it feel like we never eat one? Because we do. Male and female broilers are raised side by side for meat, which means male birds make up a substantial share of the chicken entering the food supply every single year. Same farms, same trucks, same grocery shelves. If you've eaten chicken breast this week, there's a real chance it came from a male bird. You just never knew, because nothing on the label tells you. But here's where it gets really wild. You know that fancy little Cornish game hen you see in the freezer section? The small, elegant bird restaurants love to plate up for a nice dinner? The name literally has hen in it. You'd assume that means female, right? Wrong. Under federal regulation, a Cornish game hen is legally defined as a young chicken under 5 weeks old, weighing under 2 pounds, and I want you to really hear this part, of either sex. That's the actual wording in the federal standard. So what does this mean in real life? A lot of those hens served at nice restaurants were actually fast-growing male chicks, harvested at just 3.5 to 4 weeks old, before they'd even hit that 2-pound cutoff. The name isn't a biological label. It's basically a marketing term for a small, young bird, and legally it says absolutely nothing about gender. Next time you see one on a menu, you'll never look at it the same way again. But here's the part that makes this whole mystery even stranger. The male chicken you might be eating tonight isn't necessarily the same missing male this video is actually about. Because it turns out the chicken industry isn't one industry. It's two completely different worlds, running side by side, using completely different birds, for completely different reasons. One world wants chickens to become meat. The other wants chickens to lay eggs. And that second world is where the real mystery and the harder question actually lives. So let's break this down properly. On one side, you've got broiler chickens, bred over decades specifically to grow fast and pack on muscle. Male and female broilers live basically the same life, eat the same feed, and both end up as meat. That's the group we've been talking about this whole time. On the other side, you've got layer chickens, a completely different bird, bred for a completely different job. Instead of putting energy into muscle, a layer hen's body is built almost entirely around producing eggs, while staying small and light for her whole life. These aren't just two versions of the same animal anymore. Decades of selective breeding have pushed them so far apart that a broiler and a layer are almost built for opposite purposes. One is an engine for meat, the other is an engine for eggs. And that difference is exactly why the next part of this story happens. Here's the problem. A layer hen can lay eggs. A layer rooster can't. And because layer breeds were never bred for meat, they're small, slow-growing, and low on muscle. Raising a male layer chick to a size worth eating would take far more time and far more feed than a broiler needs, for a fraction of the meat. Economically, it just doesn't work. So what happens to him? Shortly after hatching, male layer chicks are typically culled at the hatchery, because there's simply no viable path forward for them in that system. Industry estimates put the US total somewhere in the hundreds of millions each year. That's a number worth sitting with for a second. It's not that male chickens vanish across the board. It's that one very specific category, the egg-laying type, mostly never gets the chance to grow up. This isn't a hidden conspiracy or some dark secret. It's just the blunt economics of a system that was built entirely around one output: eggs, not meat. You might be wondering, how do hatcheries even tell male from female in one day? These are day-old chicks. They basically all look the same. One common method dates back nearly a century, discovered by researchers studying subtle differences inside the chick's anatomy. Today, a faster version is used in a lot of commercial hatcheries. Workers, or now machines, spread open a tiny wing feather. In some commercial breeds, females show one row of feathers growing noticeably longer than the other, while the male's feathers come in roughly even. That one quick visual check, done in a couple of seconds, is part of what decides which path that chick's life takes. It's oddly simple for something with such enormous consequences downstream. So here's the question that ties this whole thing together. If a meaningful share of our chicken meat is male, why does it feel completely invisible at the store? Under USDA rules, young chicken meat sold as broiler, fryer, or roaster is legally defined as being of either sex. Companies aren't required to disclose it, so there's no legal incentive, and honestly no commercial incentive either, to separate or label birds by sex. And it's not just paperwork. It's physical, too. At 4 to 8 weeks old, these birds haven't developed obvious male features yet. No big comb, no long spurs, none of the traits you'd picture on a rooster. Once that bird becomes a boneless breast sitting in a tray, there's genuinely nothing left to tell you which sex it came from. So it's not a conspiracy. It's not being hidden on purpose. It's just never been relevant enough to label. And that information gap is exactly why this myth exists in the first place. One more piece of the puzzle. Not every rooster gets culled as a chick. Some are actually needed. Breeder farms keep a relatively small number of adult roosters specifically to fertilize eggs the natural way. Eventually, once fertility drops and their job is done, their meat is far too tough for a roast dinner. Think old muscle, dense connective tissue. So instead, they typically get processed into canned soups, broths, gravies, and pet food. Not glamorous, but still very much part of the food chain, just not the part anyone puts on a dinner plate. Here's something worth watching, though. The practice of culling day-old male layer chicks is starting to shift. Parts of Europe have moved to restrict or ban it, pushing hatcheries towards something called in ovo sexing. In simple terms, it's a way of scanning the egg itself, sometimes using light, sometimes testing a tiny fluid sample, to figure out the chick sex before it even hatches. In theory, male eggs could be identified and redirected early, before a chick is ever born. In the US, this technology is still early stage, slower and more expensive than traditional methods, and not yet widely adopted commercially. But it's steadily moving from the lab toward real-world use, and it's the clearest sign yet that this part of the system might actually change. So let's bring it all together. Male chickens aren't simply missing. A large share of the chicken meat you've eaten in your life was very possibly male. You just had no way of knowing because the label never told you. The group that truly disappears is far more specific. Male chicks from the egg-laying industry, culled because their biology doesn't fit a system built purely around eggs. The label on your chicken pack was never lying to you. It just never told you the whole story because legally it never had to. So next time you're buying chicken, do you think you could ever actually tell whether it came from a male or a female bird? Let me know in the comments. And if you like uncovering the strange systems hiding behind ordinary, everyday things, subscribe. I dig into stuff like this every week. See you in the next one.